Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a scalpel to a film that really, truly redefined what a cinematic event could be in 2025.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about Ryan Coogler's visceral, R-rated, period horror masterpiece, Sinners.
A masterpiece, but a complicated one.
For sure. And this deep dive, it isn't just a review. Think of it more like an archaeological dig into the whole cultural and financial phenomenon this movie became.
Which is necessary.
Right. We have a huge research report here in front of us. It's full of audience analysis, production notes, some really intense thematic deconstructions, and, some truly fascinating technical specifics on how Coogler actually pulled this thing off.
And we absolutely need that level of detail because this is not a film you can analyze on a surface level. We're not here to just, recite the plot.
Yeah.
The plot's actually deceptively simple. We're here to analyze Sinners as this profound cultural statement and maybe even more importantly, a financial anomaly that just shook Hollywood to its core.
That's the hook.
That is the whole hook. The fact that an original horror film, and let's just keep stressing this, an R-rated period horror film, managed to just defy the industry's total dependence on IP.
It's unheard of.
It's a commercial anomaly disguised as a horror film. That's what we're looking at.
Okay, so let's unpack that financial shockwave first, because that's really where the story begins and where the industry started paying very close attention.
Right.
Sinners didn't just succeed. It exploded. It set a completely new bar for original horror. We're talking about a staggering $45.6 million domestic opening weekend.
45.6. Just let that number sink in for a second.
It wasn't just a win. It felt like a hostile takeover. It topped the global box office for 2 weekends straight.
And look what it beat. It was knocking out these legacy sequels, these big universe entries that were basically guaranteed to own that quarter.
Exactly.
What's so fascinating to me about that number, that 45.6 million, is that it just screams audience fatigue, doesn't it?
It has to be.
For years, we've been told that spectacle has to equal IP, that serialized stories are the only safe bet. And then suddenly, this high-concept R-rated film comes along and proves that, no, an auteur-driven spectacle is still a massive, massive draw.
But the risk, though. Let's talk about the risk.
Oh, the stakes were huge. This was not some quick, cheap, found-footage indie thing that got lucky.
No.
This was a blockbuster commitment. The production budget was estimated to be somewhere around $90 to $100 million.
Which is just, it's insane for this genre.
It is. Coogler, Michael B. Jordan, the studio, they were betting the farm on original horror, a genre that, historically it doesn't get those 9-figure budgets unless it's tied to some massive franchise.
Right.
So this commercial triumph wasn't just a success, it was a validation of an incredibly risky creative decision.
And I think they were betting on their brand, which you could argue is more valuable than almost any IP out there right now.
I think you have to argue that.
And that brings us right to the core of the film's pre-sold hype.
The Coogler and Jordan dynasty. This collaboration, it's become this distinct cinematic brand. It has the same weight, the same audience expectation as, Scorsese and De Niro or Nolan and Murphy.
Right.
When you see those two names together, the audience just trusts the product.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's boxing superheroes or in this case, a bloody period horror film.
Well, and that trust is earned, right?
Yeah.
It's built on this very deliberate, decade-long arc that showed audiences that this partnership understands both nuance and scale.
Oh, absolutely. You can just trace it.
You really can. You start with the raw, emotionally devastating social realism of Fruitvale Station that established their serious, dramatic chops right out of the gate. Then they take on the legacy of a classic with Creed, proving they can handle franchise expectations and, mass appeal. And then they just redefine global pop culture with Black Panther.
Which combines spectacular world building with just profound thematic depth. It's an incredible run.
It is. So all of that trajectory,
Yeah.
it created this huge reservoir of goodwill. You could call it trust equity.
That's a good way to put it.
The audience bought tickets to Sinners, not just because they saw a trailer for Vampires in the South, right? They bought them because they trusted Coogler and Jordan to deliver something meaningful, something with a deep emotional resonance, even inside the most visceral horror setting.
And that foundation, that trust, is what allowed them to pull off what I think many people called the most radical genre pivot of the decade.
A pivot is everything.
It's the source of the shock, I think. It's a kind of tonal whiplash that very few directors could survive, let alone master.
Right. Coogler was celebrated globally for the aspirational, majestic Afrofuturism of Wakanda, this powerful fantasy of, uncolonized technological power.
Right, a place of hope.
A place of hope. And then he just turns around and drops us into the claustrophobic, sun-drenched, muddy dread of the 1930s Mississippi Delta. It's a move from sovereignty, from this kingdom of possibility, to total systemic oppression under Jim Crow.
It's a total disruption of expectation.
It is, but I think it's also a thematic deepening. He's forcing the audience to confront the historical reality that Afrofuturism is trying to escape or transcend.
That's a good point.
It's hard enough to just pivot to horror, but to pivot to period horror, grounded in the systematic terror of the Jim Crow South, it brings up this really important critical question. Did that blend of profound historical weight with, visceral supernatural terror,
whoa,
did it work seamlessly?
Or did it feel like, as some of those early critics were suggesting, two different movies stitched together?
Exactly, where the history and the horror were kind of fighting for dominance.
And I think the reason critics even ask that question is because of the density of it all. The tension between the brutal, documented reality of Jim Crow and this fantastical, mythological horror of the vampire siege. That's what makes the film so challenging.
It's so compelling.
But ultimately, yes, so compelling. The film doesn't really offer any easy answer. It just layers one terror on top of another. And I would defend the idea that this shock value, this sudden, brutal collision of worlds, is, in fact, the entire point.
I agree completely. And in doing that, they just completely redefined the vampire mythos. We are so used to the European aristocracy.
The castles, the capes.
The velvet, the high Gothic drama of Stoker and Rice, right?
Yeah.
And Coogler just systematically strips all of that away. He transplants the monster into the muddy, humid, historically charged setting of the segregated South.
And that changes everything.
It does. These creatures aren't floating above the world in some crypt. They're creatures of the soil, of the lowlands. The sources even describe them as hiding in the mud.
Which instantly makes them feel more physical, more primal, and terrifyingly immediate. They're like parasites of a specific place.
Yes.
And that physical grounding is so essential, and it leads us right into part 2, analyzing the setting itself, which is basically an active antagonist right alongside the vampires.
Oh, 100%. The environment is not neutral background. It's a character, and it's defining the terms of survival from the very first frame.
Okay, so let's get into the details of that setting. We're in 1932.
Right, which is the absolute height of the Jim Crow era, and it's happening at the same time as the devastating bottom of the Great Depression.
A perfect storm of misery.
It really is. The environment is described in all the research as sweltering, muddy, perpetually oppressive. I mean, you are physically uncomfortable just watching the movie.
Which is a testament to the technical filmmaking, which I know we'll get to.
We will. But the cinematography, it just emphasizes this sticky, draining heat of a Delta summer. You can feel it.
In the brutality of that setting, it serves such a vital thematic function. The fantastical elements, the creatures coming out of the dark, they only work, they only land because the historical systemic elements are so brutally real.
That's a crucial point for the character's journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the twins, Elijah Smoke-More and Elias Stackmore, are reversing the Great Migration.
Right, they're going back down.
They're descending back into this rural hell they thought they'd escaped by going north to Chicago. That frames their entire decision-making process. They came home looking for a sanctuary, maybe just a hiding place.
But the town isn't a refuge at all. It's a prison. It's defined by sundown towns and this constant low-grade racial terror.
Yeah.
The systemic oppression is the baseline terror, and the supernatural violence is just built right on top of it.
And the pivotal location, the one that anchors the whole community and really defines the target to the attack, is the juke joint.
That inverted sanctuary.
It's exactly that. It's a space of such profound contradiction. I mean, sociologically, the juke joint was an absolute necessity, right? It was a space of survival and culture for the community. It's where people could gather, play music, find some temporary freedom.
And exist outside of the punitive white gaze.
For a few hours, yeah.
But it was also morally ambiguous. I mean, it was seen as sin by the more devout members of the community, right? The elders, the churchgoers.
Right. It's the place where the heroes are literally dancing with the devil, just like the tagline says.
And that tension, that sociological tension, the sacred space of culture versus the profane space of sin, that's exactly why the attack is such a profound violation.
It is. The vampire siege attacks the one physical cultural space Black people had created for themselves in this segregated world. It takes away the last little bit of control and safety they had carved out.
And just as that violence is escalating, the film gives us that jarring parallel evil.
The KKK?
The local white supremacist group, yeah. They arrive looking for vengeance against Smoke and Stack for their gangster past up north.
And this is where Coogler makes such a powerful and, I think, shocking narrative choice.
The scene where the vampires attack the KKK is just, it's pure, unadulterated, cathartic violence. I mean, you heard cheers in theaters.
Oh, yeah.
But narratively, it establishes something far more crucial than just audience satisfaction. It establishes that the vampires are an equal opportunity predator.
Yes. They are a force that just completely supersedes the human racial hierarchy of the South. They are consuming everyone in their path, regardless of their position in that societal power structure.
That distinction broadens the metaphor so beautifully. The vampires aren't just a simple stand-in for racism.
No, the Jim Crow setting and the KKK characters already handle that.
Right. The vampires are a metaphor for systemic consumption, for the pure, unyielding destruction of identity and humanity. And at the head of all that consumption is the master vampire, Remick.
Remick is crucial. He's introduced as a centuries-old Irish immigrant vampire.
Which is such an interesting choice. His historical context is so layered. He was once othered and displaced himself, which parallels the oppression that the characters he's preying on are experiencing.
But unlike them, who chose resilience and community? Remick chose predation to survive and to gain power. He is the ultimate, you could say, example of the price of assimilation.
And his motivation isn't just hunger. I mean, that would make him a boring monster.
Right.
It's this existential loneliness. It's a desperate desire for control. The research describes him as seeking fellowship to replace the family he lost in Ireland centuries ago. He sees his growing horde as this new, powerful, synthetic family.
Hence offering a dark version of community, it's the ultimate assimilation pitch.
Exactly. Join him, and you are no longer defined by race or by poverty or by the dehumanizing laws of Jim Crow. You're just defined by power. You become a consumer, not the consumed.
And that setup, tying the antagonist to historical immigration and displacement, it makes his pitch to the twins later on so incredibly seductive and so dangerous.
He's not offering them eternal life. Not really. He's offering them eternal relevance and exemption from suffering. It's this compelling, evil argument that you can only gain power by giving up your soul.
Absolutely. And that seduction is nowhere clearer than in his interaction with the twins.
Wow.
So speaking of the twins, let's dive into that duality, because Michael B. Jordan's dual performance as Elijah Smokesmore and Elias Stackmore is the you. It's the film's undeniable dramatic and thematic engine.
The twin trope it's high risk. I have to say, my initial reaction was skepticism.
I can see that.
It can so easily descend into camp, or cheap dramatic irony, or just a predictable good brother, bad brother dynamic.
But the execution here.
The technical execution was flawless. The motion control, the seamless VFX work that let Jordan interact with himself in really complex choreography, it was universally praised for a reason. It lets you suspend your disbelief and see them as two distinct, fully realized people.
And you have to, because the duality is exploring two fundamentally different psychological responses to their shared trauma. Smoke's resistance versus Stack's succumbing.
It really is.
I thought Jordan's work was just breathtaking.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes beyond the technical skill to show this real emotional distinction. The chemistry between the brothers feels so lived in, so real.
They feel like two halves of a single shared traumatic experience.
Yes, that has resulted in two very different survival philosophies. Smoke is the cynic, the pragmatist, the hyper-rationalist. He rejects superstition, he rejects faith.
See, I don't know if I would call Smoke purely a cynic. I see him more as a survivor who's been hardened into a controller.
Okay.
A cynic believes in nothing. Smoke believes implicitly in force and in his own ability to impose order on a chaotic world. Isn't that a form of faith, in a way? Just a dark one.
That's a really good point. His famous line, right? I don't believe in magic, just power. That defines him. He is the one trying to impose that northern gangster structure onto the chaos of the Delta.
Exactly.
He's the pragmatist then, the one trying to maintain control. And visually, he is coded precisely for that. He is the blue pill, as all the social media analysis suggests.
Yes, the blue pill.
He wears cool tones, deep blues, grays, embodying control, order, urban gangster survivalism. And his clothing style, specifically the tweed suits and the scally caps, directly references the stoic controlling aesthetic of the Irish gangs of the North. He believes he can control everything through force and planning.
And then you have Stack. The complete opposite. He's the dreamer, the emotional one, the hedonist. He's impulsive, and he's deeply connected to the culture and the music of the South.
Which is ironically what puts him at risk.
Exactly. He's susceptible to seduction and ultimately to the truth of the vampire's power that Remick offers.
And his visual coding is the exact inverse. He's the red pill. He wears warm tones, reds, vibrant browns, rich patterns. His clothes, the pinstripe suits, and the more flamboyant fedoras, they reference the Italian mob styles.
Which were often more expressive, more ostentatious in the North.
Exactly. He is the heart to Smoke's head. And that very openness, that connection to feeling, is what makes him vulnerable to the tragedy. He's the one who gets seduced and turned, which leads to the central conflict of the final act.
Okay, now we have to address the intense debate that has characterized the online discourse since the film came out. Specifically, the red pill, blue pill theory.
It's a mandatory segment. It completely dominated fan discussion.
It really did.
Okay, let's have this out, because I think the social media discourse, Reddit, Twitter, all the video essays, they absolutely ran with the Matrix analogy, and I think they have a really compelling case.
Okay, make it.
Stack, the red pill, he embraces the painful truth and the transformation that comes with it. He strips away the illusion of human society, the illusion that being a successful, suit-wearing gangster up north gave him any real freedom.
The world is cruel. The system is designed to consume you, so why not join the powerful consumers? Is that the idea?
That's the idea.
And that is undeniably a powerful psychological reading. And, Coogler is absolutely aware of these visual cues, but I remain fundamentally skeptical of applying that level of contemporary internet-driven pop culture semiotics to a historical film.
Oh, okay.
My counterpoint, and the one I think is grounded more firmly in the historical context from our source material, is that the color coding might just be grounded in the historical context of 1930s organized crime, and not necessarily an explicit Matrix reference.
Wait, so you're suggesting the color coding is just about gang dynamics? That seems reductive. You're saying Coogler, who is famous for layering meaning, didn't intend for us to see the existential choice in the wardrobe?
I'm not saying he didn't intend a deeper meaning. What I am saying is that the styling itself is already deeply metaphorical, which makes the Matrix overlay kind of secondary.
How so?
The choice of styling Irish North Side for Smoke in blue versus Italian South Side for Stack in red is an established visual shorthand for signaling specific gangster archetypes of that era.
Okay.
Smoke, the controller, assimilates into that stoic, controlling Irish style. It reflects a desire for invisibility and structure. Stack, the expressive one, leans into the more flamboyant, visible Italian style.
But why those specific groups? Why map black masculinity onto the structures of Irish and Italian crime?
Because the clothing choices themselves are already a metaphor for how black masculinity was forced to adapt to the structures of organized crime up north, which was often controlled by those powerful immigrant groups. It's grounded in the history of assimilation and survival in urban environments. Smoke wears the uniform of control. Stack wears the uniform of visible success. The psychological subtext is already baked into the historical costume. You don't necessarily need a 1999 sci-fi movie to see it.
I think the film is genius precisely because it holds both truths at the same time.
Okay.
Yes, the wardrobe grounds the characters in 1930s urban survivalism. But Stack wears red, Smoke wears blue. One accepts the existential nightmare, one tries to live within the structure of the dream of control. Coogler is telling us the ending before the movie even starts. He's signaling Stack's fate as the one who will embrace the truth of immortality no matter how awful it is. The fact that the costume design grounds the metaphor in historical gang dynamics and allows for the Matrix reading just shows the film's staggering thematic density. It satisfies the historian and the existential philosopher.
That's a strong defense. And it proves that this film, whether Coogler intended it or not, has these built-in debate mechanisms. It just functions on multiple levels, satisfying both the cinephiles obsessed with historical nuance and the Redditors looking for an existential clue.
Exactly.
But regardless of their color coding, their survival story relies so heavily on the revised vampire mythology that Coogler introduced, which we absolutely need to clarify now, especially given the audience confusion noted in our sources.
Yes, okay, this brings us to the mandatory segment for clarity. Haints versus vampires. You're right, there was a significant amount of confusion over the initial identification of the threat, especially for viewers who aren't familiar with Southern folklore.
We need to clear this up because it dictates the entire strategic shift of the film. When the violence starts, the characters initially mistake the creatures for haints. And in Gula and broader Southern folklore, haints are defined as restless spirits. They're non-corporeal, often tied to specific traumatic places or events.
And they're traditionally warded off with things like haint blue paint on porch ceilings, which mimics the sky and confuses the spirits, or with protective things like bottle trees.
Exactly.
And that blue paint is such an important visual motif throughout the film, isn't it? Especially in Annie's wardrobe and the set design of the juke joint. It's a spiritual protection signal. It reflects the character's initial strategy, spiritual defense.
You're trying to ward off non-physical evil.
Yes, but they learn the hard way, through brutal physical attacks, that they have completely misidentified the threat. And that line is delivered with such chilling certainty. These ain't haints, they're vampires. They're physical, flesh and blood predators.
And that shift from haint to vampire is the absolute turning point of the movie's structure.
It is.
The traditional spiritual remedies, the faith, the blue paint, the prayers, they prove completely ineffective against these creatures who are highly corporeal and violent. This forces the characters to abandon spiritual defense and shift entirely to physical warfare.
Stakes carved from wood, shotguns, and the gangster twins' northern advantage.
The Tommy guns.
The Tommy guns. It's a literalization of the move from relying on faith alone to the necessity of immediate, violent, physical action against a tangible existential threat.
And while the creatures are physical, they carry with them the most controversial mythological twist, the one that broke the logic for some traditional horror fans. The trap of the soul.
Oh boy.
Yes. This raises a really important question that I still wrestle with, and I think the audience deserves a detailed explanation of this choice, even if it feels contradictory.
Well,
Coogler's revisionist lore says that the human soul is retained within the undead body. They remember their loved ones, they feel profound emotional pain, and they retain affection, like we see with Mary's connection to Stack.
which is precisely what makes it so horrific. It's not a mindless drone driven only by hunger.
But does that make narrative sense for the horror genre? If they retain their soul in their memories, if they can mourn and show remorse, why are they pure, systematic monsters that continue to consume the community? It feels like the movie wanted it both ways.
Wait.
It wanted the terrifying, unstoppable monster action of traditional horror, but it also wanted the tragic, psychological weight of a drama. If Stack remembers his history, why doesn't he just stop? To me, that contradiction weakens the monster's agency.
See, I completely disagree that it weakens it. I think that's the tragedy and the genius of the twist. It's not about being evil. It's about being infected and perpetually tortured by a retained conscience. The transformation isn't liberation. It's eternal psychological confinement. The violence is recontextualized as a disease, a monstrous necessity. Think about Mary turning Stack. That's portrayed not as a mindless attack, but as this twisted, desperate act of love and preservation, an attempt to keep him with her forever in this new, dark existence.
So you're saying the consumption is a byproduct of their new reality, not a choice, that they're victims trapped inside their own monster bodies.
Precisely. They're trapped, knowing exactly who they are and what they've lost, but forced by their condition to commit these unspeakable acts. And that makes the final confrontation between Smoke and Stack so much more powerful. It's not a battle against an evil twin.
No.
It's an incredible test of Smoke's resolve, forcing him to kill the brother he loves, who still technically loves him back, but whose condition prevents him from being human. It heightens the stakes immensely. It pushes the horror from visceral dread into profound psychological agony. It is far more tragic than simple monster lore.
Okay. That defense is necessary and powerful. It clarifies that the contradiction isn't a plot hole, but a deliberate mechanism for tragedy.
Yes.
And that tragedy leads us perfectly into the deepest meaning of the film, the assimilation metaphor. This is where Sinners definitively transcends simple monster movie territory and becomes a commentary on American identity.
Absolutely. The vampires here are not just a simple horror trope. They represent the insidious nature of cultural erasure and the temptation of power. Remick's pitch, which is the thematic cornerstone of the film, is key. He says to the twins, "Join us, and we will do just that, together, forever."
He's offering them power, freedom, and most importantly, escape from the indignities and oppression of the Jim Crow South.
And Remick, the centuries-old Irish vampire who was once displaced and othered, he represents the ultimate dark path of assimilation.
Right. Historically, many immigrant groups in America, including the Irish, faced extreme prejudice but eventually assimilated, sometimes adopting or even enforcing the racial hierarchies they had once suffered under to secure their own place.
So Remick has chosen to assimilate into pure predation, into the structure of consumption, and he offers the black characters the same deal. Join the winning side, the side that consumes, and escape the suffering of being human and black in the segregated South.
But the cost.
The cost is everything. Joining the vampires means stripping away humanity, stripping away history, stripping away the soul. Remick is asking them to trade their identity for comfort. He offers them a powerful identity, yes, but it's one defined purely by consumption, disconnected from their heritage, their community, their past.
And the hero's refusal is the moral center of the film. It's its ultimate thesis on resistance.
It is.
They choose to remain human with all its suffering and vulnerability and mortality, choosing to be sinners with souls intact, rather than lose their identity and history to become these powerful, immortal monsters.
They choose their community, even if it means they are forever fighting and forever suffering under the sun-bleached tyranny of Jim Crow.
It's a profoundly political and personal choice that elevates the entire film. The deep meaning here is that trading your soul for safety or trading your identity for power, that's the ultimate surrender.
And holding on to identity, humanity, and communal resistance is presented as the supreme act of defiance in a hostile world.
And the power of that message is just amplified so dramatically by the sheer visual language and the craftsmanship of the film. I mean, this isn't just a story well told, it's a sensory experience that's been meticulously crafted.
Let's talk about the aesthetic of texture, which I find endlessly fascinating. The report highlights the extraordinary technical ambition here. Cinematographer Autumn Drold-Arkapaw, shooting on IMAX and 65mm film stock.
And this is where the budget went. You can see it in every single frame.
You really can.
The choice of large format wasn't just about scale, which is what it usually signifies, right? In Sinners, it was absolutely about intimacy and texture.
Totally.
The 65mm format captured the grain of the wood in the juke joint, the visible layers of sweat on the skin, the thickness of the delta mud. Coogler was forcing this extreme physical closeness to the suffering. Instead of majestic scale, the large format enhanced the claustrophobia and the tactile reality of the environment.
You could almost feel the grime. It's not a clean horror film, it's aggressively physical.
Not at all. And the palette is also crucial to that thematic experience. The visual language systematically moves from this sun-bleached, dusty oppression of the day, which drains the color out of everything,
to the ink-black, lantern-lit terror of the night. And they intentionally use Ektachrome film stock to enhance saturation during the moments of violent clarity.
The use of Ektachrome is such a key technical detail. It's known for producing these vivid colors and deep contrasts. By using it, they could enhance the saturation in specific, pivotal ways.
Making the blood redder.
Making the blood redder, making the golden warm light of the juke joint feel richer and more alive, and crucially, making that haint blue on the doors and windows pop more vibrantly against the sepia-toned mud of the historical reality. It visually juxtaposes life and death.
And that visual conflict defines the entire film. The warm golden light of the juke joint symbolizing life, culture, community is just violently pierced and extinguished by the cold, pale, almost clinical presence of the vampires, who represent death, consumption, and erasure.
It's the visual metaphor for the attack on culture itself.
It is.
The film also relies so heavily on specific, powerful iconography to reflect the dual survival strategy of the Black South during the Depression. We see that constant juxtaposition of the cross versus the shotgun.
Symbolizing the necessity of both faith and firepower.
Absolutely. The characters pray, they rely on spiritual protection, but they are absolutely ready to reload the trench guns and the Tommy guns. Survival requires both God and high-caliber ammunition.
And then there's the dobro guitar, the hero prop carried by Sammy, the musician. It's so much more than just an instrument.
It really is.
It represents the spiritual power of the blues, connecting characters to their ancestors, their history, their defiance. And the research suggests that the music literally acts as a weapon of spiritual warfare in the film.
In Ludwig Göransson's score, it isn't just background music, it's fundamentally diegetic.
Right, meaning the music exists within the world of the film. It's played by the characters or it's coming from the juke joint.
And the film literalizes that old devil at the crossroads legend by making the music a summoning mechanism. The rhythms and notes played by Sammy are described as having the power to conjure spirits and attract the vampires. But at the same time, that same musical energy provides the spiritual core and the rhythm for the final battle.
The climax is brilliantly edited, isn't it? It's so rhythmic. It suggests that the entire fight is a synchronized musical performance. A dance with the devil that has to be completed.
Which brings us right back to the tagline thesis. which truly operates on 3 distinct levels of interpretation, reinforcing the density of the source material.
Okay, so the tagline, you keep dancing with the devil, one day he's going to follow you home.
It works perfectly on multiple planes. On the literal criminal level, it's about Smoke and Stack's northern gangster, past their violence, their criminal activities, following them back down to the Delta.
Right. Remick and the KKK are both manifestations of the consequences of their sins.
Exactly. Then, on the spiritual level, it's about that conflict we mentioned between the church and the juke joint. Saturday night sin versus Sunday morning salvation.
The elders view the juke joint and the music as inviting evil in, and the movie confirms that the music literally summons the supernatural threat. The sin is the invitation.
And then on the deepest metaphorical level, the devil is the trauma of racism and systemic oppression itself.
Yes.
The film is warning that you cannot dance with these systems of evil. You can't profit from them, you can't ignore them, and you can't assume they won't eventually come for you. The vampire is the ultimate consumer, taking not just your life but your soul, embodying that total consumption of identity that systemic evil promises.
So what does this all mean for the film's long-term legacy? I think Sinners is absolutely poised to become a lasting cult classic. Much like From Dusk Till Dawn or Night of the Living Dead, movies that blended that sharp social commentary with brutal genre shocks.
I think that potential stems directly from its jarring genre-bending structure. The abrupt shift from this meticulous period crime drama to a creature feature siege horror is just so unforgettable.
It is.
It echoes the best survival horror, forcing the characters to adapt in real time. But its perceived flaws, the pacing issues some critics mention, and the confusing lore around the retained soul, are often the exact elements that drive fan deconstruction and fuel a cult following for decades.
Exactly. The messiness is the debate fodder. The fact that we are still fiercely arguing about whether the color coding is Matrix theory or 1930s gang history means this film is going to be analyzed and rewatched for years to come. It's an original film that demands multiple viewings to unpack all its thematic layers, which is just so rare in modern blockbusters.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, who now understands the financial anomaly and the thematic depth? The core takeaway here is that Sinners is far from just a monster movie.
Not at all.
It is a deeply layered psychological thriller about identity, the price of assimilation, and the ongoing cost of survival in a hostile world. And it proves definitively that original spectacle, backed by visionary directorial ambition, can still win decisively at the global box office.
And on that note, we have one final provocative thought based on the deep dive material, something for you to chew on after the credits roll.
Okay.
The traditional, cathartic, tragic ending in vampire lore demands that the monsters be eradicated, right? That the threat is neutralized.
Yes, good must triumph.
Right. But our sources note the ambiguous post-credits implications of Stack and Mary surviving, potentially as functioning vampires who have found a way to maintain some semblance of their past relationship.
And this is the ultimate question Coogler leaves us with. Their survival and their potential continuation, it represents a definitive challenge to that traditional tragic ending. If the infected can create their own new dark status quo, if they can continue to exist, however twistedly, using the very power that consumed them, does this film suggest that the ultimate act of resistance isn't eradication of the evil system, but adaptation to it?
And the creation of a new, dark, self-governing identity.
It's a huge shift from classic monster morality.
Does Assimilation have a successful, if horrifying, outcome after all? We'll leave you with that dark thought. Thanks for diving deep with us today.